Article 24.1b of the Formula 1 sporting regulations mandates that between the 24th of December and the 1st of January, all the factories of the F1 teams must shut down, just like the mid-season break in the summer. After 82,000 miles across 22 Grand Prix rounds and 5 continents, mandatory breaks like this are really important. For businesses that work in a directly competitive sport, the forces of that competition push the F1 teams to work right up to the limit of the rules, because doing any less would mean that their competitors could do more, right? And while the core designs and plans for the cars that we'll see roll out in FP1 in Bahrain, they're largely locked in, you still have so many more steps along the way to complete throughout this winter period, outside of that 9-day shutdown window. Fabrication, stress testing, quality control, all the little iterative changes to those designs that will take place throughout the production process are all steps along the journey that are hugely important by the time we get to Bahrain. Before that though, we've got effectively 2 months without cars on track. Throughout the year, and particularly during the end of season test in Abu Dhabi, the teams had planned their data collection sessions with the direct target of next year's regulations. The path then towards that goal of improved performance is split between the medium, short and long-term roles within the team members. And this rule about a mandatory winter break period was only introduced to Formula 1 back in 2022, effectively meaning then that this winter break we're coming up to now will be the second one ever. And when you look at the calendar, with the return to Shanghai as well as the re-addition of Imola back to the calendar, we're looking at 24 races for next season, and that means it's probably not the final time that we'll see these mandatory breaks changed or added to the calendar. I mean, it might be that they get extended in the future, we might see a third break get added, but either way, when that number keeps growing, you have to imagine that those periods are becoming ever more valuable to the teams, where you can finally relax, switch off from F1, recharge the proverbial batteries. Now, the drivers will spend this time doing effectively whatever they like, anything from Max and Fernando testing out the GT3s, to Lando Twitch streaming, to rallying, cycling, surfing, or even just plain chilling. The drivers will get to spend some time away from F1 with their families and friends that they're away from for so much of the year. They'll spend just enough time away from F1 to start to miss the sport, and just enough money to come back to F1 with a strong desire to cash in on their performance incentives. Lewis said before the break, in the specific context of Mercedes, "We've had so much work that we've done through the year. I'm on a Teams chat with basically the different departments, and I'll always be checking in, but of course I'm going to unplug. I have to leave the guys to do what they do best, but I'm always going to be like, hey, I wonder how it's going." But you've got to give them time. It takes time to develop. It's small steps each week. And look, in the last few years, plenty of drivers have looked to diversify their income streams with different merchandise and product partnerships. Look at Lando with Quadrant, or Verstappen with Team Redline, and Lewis has a wide portfolio of products that now includes the alcohol-free agave spirit. Even Alex Albon's got his own line of shoes, so working across these ventures outside of Formula 1 will also be a big place that they can spend their time over the break. But what about for F1 fans? Well, for some, the headline event will be the release of Drive to Survive Season 6. The editors will surely have had a pretty challenging time trying to fabricate storylines in a year that saw 19 races won by a single driver. That driver who before has been spoken about his disdain for the growing media presence within Formula 1, and I'm sure there'll be some pretty good stuff in there though. Our vaults of memes and funny clips will get sufficiently refilled before the start of next year when that season comes out in February. And the first real hints of what we'll see next year, now that we know our 20 drivers are all retaining their seats, will be the livery reveals. Although they're often framed as car reveals by the marketing departments of teams, they're largely just hype builders and an excuse to fill a YouTube live stream with ads and generally optimistic interviews about how great they're going to be next year. It keeps the sponsors happy, and it's all before revealing a broadly similar livery to last year. It's important from a business perspective, but equally vapid in its sporting value. And over the winter, there'll be a host of personnel changes to report on, as well as greater recruitment in the motorsport industry. Media-wise, you'll get some longer interviews from drivers and team members who, largely because they're not having to deliver the same 2-minute interview to every different TV channel at a race weekend, they're more willing to dive into insightful detail on their memories and opinions of action throughout the year. The further you get away from dramatic moments, usually, the more details involved with those moments that you can get. The PR and marketing goals for the teams over this winter break will be effectively to build up as much hype, as much brand awareness as possible, while simultaneously releasing as little useful information to the other teams and the media as they can. Before Bahrain 2, you'll also get the filming of all the FOM promo social videos like the Grill the Grid series, and you'll also get all the shots for that intro montage that plays along with the theme music before every race. And the last thing, you'll also get the pre-season shakedown footage from the teams, as we get all these lovely stock footage shots that we use and admittedly reused quite a lot throughout the year. All the different teams will send a car out on track, they'll get all these different pickup shots that we can use throughout our coverage to showcase the cars that we're talking about. And in theory at least, going on right now in between the two Formula One seasons. You have the F1 esports series. It's something that's grown massively in popularity year on year, but at the time of recording in 2023, it's a developing story with regards to the future and just what role, if any, Formula One and the teams want it to play in the future of driver development, of promotion, and their overall brand identity. Now, if we jump back to the non-computer generated world, most drivers and engineers roll their eyes a bit when the pundits start to pick apart testing timesheets and even ones from free practice in an attempt to extrapolate some valuable predictions on where all the teams are going to line up and what's going to happen once the green flag flies. And the drivers are probably right to do this. I mean, if we go back to the first test session of 2022 in Barcelona, after the 3 days, the two Mercedes topped the timesheets in a car that didn't even feature the zero pod concept that they arrived in Bahrain with, and before the 2023 season at their livery reveal event, the Ferrari CEO said that the SF23 would be a single-seater that will be unprecedented in terms of speed, and a single win across the year and a P3 in the championship. It's not quite unprecedented for Ferrari, and it's still a little better than their 2020 championship run, but I don't think that's quite what he meant, and I think there's still some lessons to be learned from the reverse sandbagging and the pre-roost chicken counting that has caught teams off guard in the past. The challenge for the teams then, and one that they'll be trying to solve over this winter break, is to get all that simulated data, that wind tunnel data, correctly aligned and correlated with what will come off the car sensors once they hit the track. Toto says that Mercedes are changing the concept, completely moving away from how we laid out the chassis, the weight distribution, the airflow. I mean, literally, there is almost every component that has been changed, because only by doing that do we have a chance. While for the Ferrari-engined and newly named Stake F1 team Kick Sauber, that livery reveal is likely to be the only one that showcases an actual new livery design, now that the Scarlet Red Alfa Romeo brand guidelines no longer need to be adhered to. Now, Stake F1 team Kick Sauber, that's the official name, but we've only just gotten used to calling the Red Bull second team the AlphaTauris rather than just the Toro Rossos, a name that I can't understand why they ever moved away from in the first place. But if we go back to Sauber, I would guess and probably hope that everyone just calls them Sauber, and I think to quite a large extent that'll undermine the sponsorship value of Kick and Stake. And feel free to find your own stake-based pun about that deal not being very well done or something along those lines. But at Sauber, the ex-McLaren technical director James Key will have the pressure on after his first full year in charge. It's similar in some ways to Dan Fallow's Aston Martin appointment before 2023. Key has joined the team and worked at race weekends this year, has brought upgrades that he's helped design this year. But because of the time lag in car development next year, it'll be his first full year in charge after a winter development period, and that will be an important statement for Key and the Swiss team to see whether they can make that jump up in performance just like Aston Martin did under Fallow's leadership. And elsewhere in the paddock at Key's old place of business, Rob Marshall will be ending his Red Bull gardening leave and joining McLaren in place of Key. And with McLaren's great lineup, their new leadership structure, and now a technical director with an understanding of the secrets of the RB19, McLaren are well poised. They'll be hoping to bridge the pace of their late 2023 form with a stable floor downforce package that they can take from the Red Bull design theory. But what the puzzle will be for McLaren is to kind of fit that around the Mercedes power unit and to also see whether it works in unison or against the directions that they've already started moving towards. And if it does, along with that Mercedes power unit also getting upgrades over the winter, McLaren could be in for a really, really fast start next year. Now, if you're particularly bored over the off-season and you're more interested in the reality of Formula One and the drive to survive drama, you can dive into the pages of these black and white cavalry texts for yourself on the F1 website, the full list of the sporting, financial and technical regulations. If you spot any loopholes, feel free to send them to your team principal of choice and try and help them out for next year. But one thing that stood out to me is a new addition that will undoubtedly affect the visuals of the 2024 cars will be the new air cooling ducts, Article 3.6.5. Here's that in full. Now, IndyCar already has a similar concept, but they have a whole transparent aero screen that goes around the halo too, so just what these cooling vents will look like in Formula One and how they'll contribute to or detract from the aerodynamics of the rest of the car is part of the puzzle for the design crews, and we'll see those solutions come out on the 2024 cars along with all the other upgrades that the teams are going to try and bring. So whatever they come up with, I think that's been a good look at what the F1 teams will be getting up to over the off-season and some of the underlying stories that we can look forward to as the cars hit the track in February. As always, thank you very much for watching, and let me know what bold predictions you've got for the 2024 F1 season down in the comments. Check out crash.net for coverage across the racing world, and subscribe here to stay up to date with all the headlines from the world of Formula One.